Your will and mine are now as one. Both sides of time are revealed to you, and you alone. You know I am the beginning. What shall you do?
To you like a red rose, seeking the sun, no matter where it goes. I long to stay where the light dwells, to guard against the cold that I know so well.
As a brief aside, due to the nature of Fire Emblem 3 houses, the story can vary depending on what route is chosen out of the 4 possible options. For this history breakdown, I will be using my initial playthrough as a basis, using a female Byleth in the Golden Deer route. Byleth Eisner was born on the 20th of the month of the Horse Bow Moon, in the imperial year of 1159, to Geralt and Citri Eisner, the current vessel of the goddess Sothis. However, during her birth, complications would arise and it would appear that both mother and daughter would pass away, with it even being discovered that Byleth had no heartbeat. Right before Citri would pass away, she would beg her creator, the Archbishop of the Church of Seiros, Lady Rhea, to transfer her crest, the Crest of Flames, into Byleth, hoping to save the child. This transfer would be a success and Byleth would survive, becoming Sothis' new vessel, while Citri would unfortunately pass away. Soon after her mother's death, Geralt, growing suspicious of the worrying behavior of the infant, would have his daughter examined in secret, discovering that Byleth still possessed no heartbeat. Now, no longer trusting Rhea, Geralt would fake Byleth's death in a fire and soon after would leave, secretly taking his daughter with him. Byleth's upbringing would be unusual, to say the least. Even as a child, she would rarely show emotion, with Geralt later commenting that he had never even seen her cry. To add on to that, Byleth would grow up around a band of mercenaries led by her father, which would no doubt result in her being around all sorts of questionable people. Growing up, she would eventually be trained personally by her father, and by the age of 20 would gain a fearsome reputation, becoming known as the Ashen Demon. It was also around this age when Byleth would start to have reoccurring dreams about a young girl on a throne, even having spoken to the girl in her latest dream. Waking up the next day while on a standard mission, Byleth would encounter 3 young students of the Officers' Academy: Edelgard von Restfelg, Dmitri Alexander Blythed, and Claude von Regen, who were all being chased by bandits. And after a brief fight, Byleth would see an attack coming for Edelgard and would jump in the way, ready to take the blow for her new ally, only for time to suddenly come to a halt. And the same girl from her dreams would speak to her, chastising her for almost getting them killed before introducing herself as Sothis, who would explain what she had done for Byleth and turning back time in order for Byleth to not make the same mistake. And the young mercenary this time would defeat the bandit properly. Afterwards, the Knights of Seiros would appear with a former trainee of Geralt's named Alois leading them. Alois would insist that Geralt return to Garreg Mach Monastery along with Byleth, and on their way back, Byleth would learn that the 3 students she had saved just so happened to each be future rulers of the Adrustian Empire, the Leicester Alliance, and the Holy Kingdom of Fargus respectively. Upon reaching the monastery, Byleth would be introduced to Rhea, who would feign ignorance of Byleth's origin and would ask the young woman to teach the students of the Officers' Academy, even allowing Byleth to decide which class she wished to teach. Byleth, taking an interest in the Golden Deers, would decide to lead them for the coming year, and over the next year, Byleth and her class would be sent to battle bandits, crush rebellions, and stop nobles desperate for more power, as well as hold off attacks on the monastery itself from people calling themselves the Death Knight and the Flame Emperor. On one of these missions, Byleth would stop looters from taking a hero's relic, the Sword of the Creator, and upon taking the weapon, Byleth would activate its dormant power, and as a result, Rhea would allow Byleth to use the relic, which Byleth would soon make her main weapon. Soon afterwards, on a mission, it would be discovered that the librarian of the monastery, Tomas, was aiding in the Death Knight and Flame Emperor, and he would reveal himself to, in reality, be a new entity called Solon, who is aiding the Flame Emperor. Soon after this, there would be an attack on the monastery by demonic beasts, and Geralt would be sent in along with Byleth and her class to defend the students and slay the monsters. However, during this mission, a student of the monastery named Monica would stab Geralt in the back, fatally wounding. And while Byleth would attempt to reverse time and stop her, she would be interrupted by Solon. With Solon and Monica fleeing, Byleth would run to her father's side. However, there was nothing to be done, and Byleth would cry for the first time in her life as Geralt died in her arms. Soon after this, Solon and Monica would be discovered near the monastery, and Byleth would leave to take her revenge, cornering Monica, who would similarly reveal herself to be Kranya, one of Solon's minions. Byleth would corner Kranya, but this would turn out to be a trap, as Solon would sacrifice Kranya, ripping out her heart to envelop Byleth in darkness, moving her to another dimension where she and Sothis would be trapped. Seeing no other option, Sothis would grant Byleth her full power, but in doing so would need to fuse with her vessel and would disappear into Byleth's subconscious, fully becoming one. Now with Sothis' power flowing through her, Byleth would use the now fully powered Sword of the Creator to cut herself free from this dimension and would reappear on the battlefield before slaying Solon. Now that Rhea believed Byleth was ready to fuse with Sothis, she would have the young woman sit on the progenitor's god throne, only for nothing to happen. However, as this took place, the Flame Emperor would appear once again to raid the tomb, but this time Byleth would defeat them, revealing the Flame Emperor to be none other than Edelgard, who would then flee with assistance from her servant Hubert, and would return home, taking the throne and ascending to the Emperor, and would immediately raise an army to attack Garreg Mach. Byleth and her students would defend the monastery, but the numbers would be overwhelming, and Byleth would be ordered to retreat by Rhea, who would go out onto the battlefield and would take her true form of a dragon known as the Immaculate One. And despite doing serious damage to the enemy's army, she would begin getting overwhelmed by demonic beasts. Seeing this, Byleth would step in, saving Rhea, but this would turn out to be a trap, as a new entity would appear and attack Byleth, sending her into a ravine where she would spend the next 5 years in a coma. Awakening after being pulled out of a river by a villager, Byleth would return to the monastery where she would meet back up with Claude, who had since become the leader of the Leicester Alliance, as well as the other Golden Deer students. Now, using Garreg Mach as a base, Claude would begin to wage war on the Adrestian Empire, eventually meeting in a three-way conflict with Edelgard and Dimitri personally leading each side. The battle would be bloody, with many classmates forced to take each other's lives, but in the end, the Alliance would be victorious, with Edelgard retreating with the remnants of her forces and Dimitri passing away from his injuries attempting to chase her down. In an effort to keep their momentum, the Alliance would attempt to take an Imperial fort, only for it to be destroyed by powerful weapons called the Javelins of Light. However, not letting this set them back, Byleth and Claude would march to the capital of the Empire and would finish what the Emperor had started. And after pushing their way to Edelgard, killing all who followed her, Byleth would personally defeat and execute Edelgard, finding a captive Rhea as well as a note from Hubert, who would inform the Alliance that there was an even bigger threat to the people of Foldland, an organization known as Those Who Slither in the Dark, which Kranya, the Death Knight, and Solon were all a part of. They would then free Rhea, taking the Archbishop to the organization's base of Shambhala, where Byleth would once again personally confront the leader of Those Who Slither in the Dark, Thales, and defeat him. In a last-ditch effort to destroy Rhea and Byleth, Thales would have the Javelins of Light attack Shambhala, but thanks to Rhea intercepting and soaking up the explosions from the weapons, everyone would make it out in time. However, unbeknownst to them, the fallen hero Nemesis had been revived and would be freed by the destruction caused by the weapons. Now able to speak with Rhea alone, the Archbishop would tell Claude and Byleth the truth behind Byleth's birth, as well as the origins of the hero's relics, being forged from Sothis' bones and the bones of her children, and finally that she herself was Sothis' daughter, Saros. Then, however, the revived Nemesis would attack the monastery, and Byleth, Claude, and the surviving students would battle Nemesis, with Byleth and Claude working together to land a killing blow on the former hero, finally bringing an end to the conflict. Now, with all threats taken care of, Rhea would step down as Archbishop, and the Church of Saros would form the United Kingdom of Foldland, with Byleth as its leader. Right, epilogue. So, I chose to have my Byleth marry Claude, because I have eyes that work. Hello and welcome everyone to an in-between season character showcase going over the protagonist of Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Byleth Eisner. Now for this breakdown, rather than my standard analysis where I would take a single person of a character, for this breakdown I will be using a composite version of Byleth, examining their showings from both 3 Houses and 3 Hopes, as well as some elements based on their appearance in Smash Bros. Ultimate. However, I will not be scaling based on the possible fights in this game, and will more so be using it to examine certain elements of their fighting style. Finally, as there is no canon version of Byleth, I will be using male, female, and gender-neutral pronouns interchangeably in this video, as well as going over both genders' weight and height in the physical department, which I will now get into. By the end of Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Byleth is a 26-year-old human male or female, with a male Byleth standing at 5 feet 9 inches or 175 centimeters tall, likely weighing about 160 pounds or 72.6 kg, and a female Byleth coming in at about 5 feet 5 inches or 165 centimeters tall and weighing roughly 138 pounds or 32.6 kilograms. Regardless of which gender is chosen for Byleth, they will have a slim build with surprisingly little muscle mass for their chosen profession. Spending much of their early life as a mercenary, it's no surprise that Byleth is in great physical shape, being a physically imposing opponent for the vast majority of fighters, even managing to hold her own against powerhouses that have spent more time developing their physicality than Byleth has been alive. And he was made even more powerful after fusing with Sothis. Starting with strength, Byleth is incredibly capable even early on. In 3 Hopes, she was able to effortlessly interrupt and stop a blow from Shez, and even sent her flying with a single thrust of his blade. In the first mission of 3 Houses, he disarmed a man of a heavy axe and sent him flying back with a single swing of his sword. He evenly clashed swords with Edelgard, who in a near-death state can throw a dagger hard enough to pierce plate armor, and can effortlessly wield a heavy axe with incredible speed. With an unarmed physical strike, he can harm or even kill a soldier in full plate armor. Being assisted with the Sword of the Creator, they broke a magical barrier with a single swing of the weapon. In the Crimson Flower route, a combined attack from Byleth and Edelgard was enough to kill Rhea's true form, the Immaculate One, who survived being engulfed by an explosion created by multiple javelins of light. With these missiles being stated to be capable of wiping out entire countries, calculated to be around island level. And while yes, the hero's relics do boost the capabilities of those who can use them, this is not purely accomplished by the relics, as even crestless characters who can't safely wield relics can damage the Immaculate One. And finally, she matched strength against Nemesis, who was capable of fighting Rhea 1v1 and killed the goddess Sothis without the use of a hero's relic. In terms of speed, he is no less impressive, being shown early on to be capable of dodging arrows as well as magic blasts from fireballs, and later on even dodging meteors, lightning, and even lasers fired from dragons, putting him at faster than light in terms of speed. And in 3 of the 4 routes being shown to evenly match and defeat, and eventually defeat Edelgard, who can similarly perform each of these feats. In the Golden Deer route, Byleth also matches Nemesis, whom killed Sothis and fought one-on-one against Rhea, and in the 3 Hopes timeline was able to react and even matched a boosted Shez, who actually manages to defeat and kill Byleth while she's being possessed by Sothis in certain routes. But when in control of themselves, they are able to fight evenly with Shez, who was capable of reacting to Sothis' time manipulation. Durability mainly comes down to scaling, but as usual, thanks to the plot of 3 Houses, I am forced to recognize that a single well-placed wound can and will bring down Byleth, just like anyone else in his setting. However, he also seems to have a heightened resistance to magic-based attacks, as he can avoid anything from fireballs exploding point blank in their face, a lightning bolt getting called down onto her, and even survive a blast from Rhea's laser, which is powerful enough to vaporize fully armored soldiers and collapse buildings with a glancing blow, as well as strikes from Nemesis, who once again killed Sothis without a hero's relic, fought Rhea one-on-one with the use of the Sword of the Creator, and with this same sword could severely damage entire armies with a single swing of the weapon. For this breakdown, while I know Byleth can be equipped with most any weapon, it's really not up for debate that canonically she favored swords as her primary weapon type. So I will be sticking to the Sword of the Creator, as this is the blade she is shown using in cutscenes as well as promotional material, with the only exception being his appearance in Super Smash Bros, where he also wields the hero's relics typically used by the 3 house leaders. And while I did consider taking these weapons into account, as this is a composite breakdown, I decided against it, as it could give Byleth too big of an edge to the point where I believe it could change the outcome of a fight all on its own, depending on the opponent. Both versions of Byleth use the exact same armor and the exact same placement, wearing metal wrist and elbow guards and shoulder pauldrons on their upper body, and on the lower body a single knee guard on their right leg, possibly due to this being the one they favored in combat. Her primary weapon was the Sword of the Creator, our hero's relic created by Nemesis from the bones of the goddess Sothis. This weapon is a bastard sword roughly 5 feet or 152 centimeters long with a double-edged blade, with one side being laden with serrated pieces of bone, though taking a more traditional style near the tip. This would make the sword an excellent weapon for both stabbing and slashing, being a very well-rounded sword. But this weapon also had a secondary function, being able to break into segments connected by a cord, allowing the sword to function as a whip, gaining the speed and flexibility while maintaining its full power. more. Heroes' relics in general are said to contain immense power, with Claude openly stating that it's said that these weapons are capable of splitting mountains in half. And considering the scaling around these weapons, I don't think this is just a legend or hyperbole. The Sword of the Creator itself is the strongest of the hero's relics, and is explicitly shown to be capable of wiping out entire battalions with a single swing in its whip form, one-shotting a demonic beast which, along with 2 others, was overwhelming Rhea, who, may I remind you, survived a missile stated to be capable of wiping off entire countries from the map. And once again, while this is partly due to Edelgard and Byleth's strength, a combined blow from both of these two did kill Rhea. While not specializing into magic or being as naturally gifted with the use of magic as characters like Hubert, Leonhart, and Lysithea, Byleth is still capable of using both offensive and healing magic. And considering that their unique class of the Enlightened One is capable of using magic, and in the Three Hopes timeline, Byleth's warrior gauge special attacks involves fire spells, as well as his regular use mid-combat, it seems like a reasonable assumption that Byleth is not only proficient in, but took an interest in magic as a fallback, for an emergency offensive abilities, or in order to heal allies or themselves if needed. Byleth can learn a decent collection of 6 offensive, mainly fire-based spells, the most basic of which is fire, allowing her to shoot a fireball at her opponents. Bolganun creates 4 smaller flames that will travel around an opponent before converging on their location and creating an explosion. And his most powerful fire spell is Ragnarok, which will cause the earth itself to erupt around an opponent, bringing molten rock up onto them from the ground. Nosferatu, while primarily an offensive magic spell, used light magic to damage an opponent, it will also heal the caster for half of the inflicted damage. Thunder will just straight up call a lightning strike down onto their opponent. And finally, Aura, which will surround an enemy in light before inflicting a good amount of damage. They can also heal with a small collection of healing magic, which will allow them to heal any nearby ally. However, they cannot heal themselves with this ability. Due to her lineage and the unique circumstances of her birth, Byleth inherited the Crest of Flames from her mother Citri. This crest grants Byleth a small chance, 30% to be exact, to regain health based on 1/3 of the damage dealt to their opponents. It also has a very slight chance of increasing her physical strength mid-attack and even preventing an opponent from performing a counterattack. Due to his connection with Sothis, he gained the ability to summon her mid-combat to erect a shield that raises her and her allies' resistance to magic attacks, giving them a +7 to their resistance stats, but it will fade over time, and a power originally belonging to Sothis that eventually became his own after fusing with the goddess is Divine Pulse. This ability granted them the power to manipulate time, stopping it as long as they desire. However, at first, while time was stopped they similarly could not act, it has been shown in the Three Hopes timeline that after fusing with Sothis and gaining full control over this power, Byleth gained the ability to move freely and stopped time on top of being able to rewind time to any point in the fight, to replay a situation, trying out different approaches in order to get the best possible result, or simply get a more favorable outcome. And while true, Byleth cannot do this infinitely, as while fully charged she can use this ability no more than 13 times in a single encounter, but this would still give them plenty of opportunities to undo any mistakes, up to and including fatal blows. Like in all of my matchups, I will be using Star Wars lightsaber fighting forms to better and more easily describe how this fighter approaches combat with their particular style. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. Growing up as a mercenary under the former leader of the Knights of Saros, it's no surprise that Byleth grew into a skilled and accomplished warrior, and by the age of 20 becoming a mercenary almost as well known as their father, being called the infamous Ashen Demon, a soldier capable of turning the tide of an entire battlefield all on their own, without showing even a hint of emotion. Despite being capable in most weapon types available to Byleth, in all appearances, she is shown to prefer the use of swords. So her showings with the blade will be what I use to break down Byleth's chosen styles. Considering Byleth also fought entire companies of soldiers on his own, it's no shock that he would at least be somewhat knowledgeable in Form 1 Shicho. While often described as a form used by beginners or novice swordsmen, Shicho still had several practical uses in general combat, best being used to attack multiple, less capable opponents, or opponents wielding ranged weapons who lack the skill and equipment to properly counter. Byleth is also a rather nimble combatant, implementing jumps and flips into his combative style in a form in a manner similar to Form 4 Ataru. Ataru as a main form mainly taught the user to stay in constant motion and would deliver an unending flurry of attacks to overwhelm an opponent's defense. Some downsides of this form, however, that quickly ate up at a user's stamina, making it impractical against multiple opponents or a long-term engagement, as well as simply not being practical in confined spaces where the user could not keep up with their momentum. There's also his willingness to implement hand-to-hand combat in tandem with his blade sequences, even going as far as to create openings in order to deliver a disorienting strike to the head, as shown in their first fight with Shez, showing a willingness to implement her entire body as a weapon. However, due to them not fully committing to this form's more acrobatic style, I believe that they merely took elements of it to further elevate their already established style of combat. However, her main combat style involved the Form 5 variation Gemso. This was a style primarily developed for blade-on-blade combat, utilizing a combination of blocks and parries. A Gemso user maintained a proper foundation of defense against both ranged and melee attacks. Immediately after defending against an opponent's strike, a Gemso stylist followed with an attack on their own, bringing the force of the opponent's own blow against them and seeking to dominate the duel. Gemso also placed a heavy focus on brute strength and pure power, with wide, powerful strikes parries followed immediately by a counterattack. Falling in line with the Xian version of this form, Byleth also had a tendency to switch from a standard grip to a reverse grip in certain situations, typically in order to deliver a wider, more powerful swing at their weapon. And finally, there was their use of Form 6 Naiman. This fighting style was a hybrid martial art created by effectively combining elements of the other lightsaber forms into a single, generalized form. Naiman balanced out the various specializations of the other forms, covering many of the basic moves but focusing on overall moderation. This would allow Byleth to more easily transition between the forms as he desired, while keeping a constant offensive. Another aspect of this lightsaber form is that it was far more direct and integrated with its use of force abilities, or in Byleth's case, magic spells into combat, allowing him to fire off a spell without interrupting the flow of a fight. This is best shown in the Three Hopes timeline, when, while playing as Byleth, it is made explicitly clear that she regularly implemented magic into her sword sequences, either by imbuing their blade with fire magic or casting a spell mid-combo to deliver a devastating strike. Tactically, Byleth is nothing short of a genius, being capable of leading their class into war zones and taking out entire enemy forces without suffering a single casualty on their end, often being able to outmaneuver the tactical minds of Dimitri, Edelgard, Claude, and Rhea depending on the chosen route, with Claude being well known for his dirty tactics and schemes turning the tide of battles, and Rhea having centuries of combat and leadership experience to fall back on. In the Golden Deer route alongside Claude, he was able to outfight Nemesis, who was able to kill Sothis without the powers of Hero's Relic, and thanks to the power of Divine Pulse, Byleth could experiment different tactics on her opponents much more safely than a standard fighter would be able to. I'm gonna be honest, going into this, I wasn't quite expecting this much from Byleth, as once again, despite being from a showcase, Byleth is one of the strongest characters I've used in the entirety of this series. Due to her lightspeed reaction feats and already island level strength before the boost of a Hero's Relic. Not to mention his time hacks making him nearly impossible to beat for certain opponents. As if there's a chance Byleth can take you down, you're in trouble, because you need to take them down up to 13 times without being aware of it and having her adapt to your combat style the entire fight. Yeah, time manipulation is fucking broken. He takes down Sam and Zack simply because of Divine Pulse. In character, Byleth has no qualms using it to take out an opponent, and while characters like Dio could survive instant kill attacks, unfortunately for him, Byleth has the firepower to actually hurt him, and Time Stop would let him deal out massive amounts of damage, while Dio can't even regenerate. Oh, and she can do this 13 times in a row without a cooldown. Now, Orochimaru is someone I wanted to point out specifically because of his seemingly immortal nature, but like the others, he still does go down to Time Stop. This is due to his regeneration and substitution abilities being active jutsu that he needs to use rather than passive abilities that will activate on their own, meaning that yes, Orochimaru could more than likely walk off any normal damage. But it's only a matter of time before Byleth gets fed up with Orochimaru regenerate and goes for a decapitation or simply incinerates him while time is stuck. However, Cinder, and by extension the other maidens, are stated to be capable of fighting around Time Stop. Yes, I'm still taking this word of God statement seriously. I paid real money to confirm it's what Miles said. Until it's contradicted, I'm using it. And they should roughly scale to him in terms of power. But here's the catch. We still don't know exactly how Cinder won that fight, only that she did. So without details like that, I'm gonna have to assume that rewinding time is still a valid strategy, and therefore Byleth could still take advantage of any opening Cinder or the other maidens give him. So yes, I think Byleth reaches SS tier and would be somewhere in the middle. Starting with the characters I don't think he could beat, Itachi is gonna open this fight with Genjutsu, which Byleth has no defense against and would likely fall into an illusion that he has no way to work around even with Divine Pulse. Sephiroth is one I could see Byleth potentially getting the win against, but Sephiroth would have better odds, mainly because Sephiroth simply has the skill, magic, and power needed to out-tax Byleth's time manipulation and corner her. But if Sephiroth acts cocky, Byleth does have the strength to damage him and could easily press a weakness with Divine Pulse, and arguably is rivaling him in terms of skill. So that's one I could realistically see going either way. I actually don't know how I feel about Godzilla and Kurama, because in a straight up fight, Byleth simply can't compete. Kurama is stated to have world-ending capabilities, and Godzilla is multi-continental by showings. So in a flat out fight, there isn't much to be said, but with Time Stop, it could be a different story. Out for fun. Simply put, I think it depends on if you think the sword of the creator could go through a soft spot like the eye or through the mouth. But in this situation, this is only available through Divine Pulse, and even then it's speculation, so I'll just say maybe. Much like Dio in the previous tier, Carnage does have some really good regeneration, and can certainly overwhelm them in a straight up fight, considering Carnage has beaten some of the best fighters in Marvel simply through sheer ferocity. But Divine Pulse and a bombardment of powerful magic, which the symbiote would not resist like a physical attack, has me siding with Byleth. Now, Nox is a very interesting opponent, considering he also possesses a form of time manipulation, as well as a plethora of other powers that could change the outcome, and is similarly skilled and ruthless. So I'll actually leave that one open, but don't worry, I plan on answering the outcome to that one sooner rather than later. Right, with all that, I've been Ryan with you too, and I will see you next time.